Throughout history, sports have brought us moments of incredible triumph and joy. But sometimes, tragedy strikes in an instant. These are 7 stories of athletes who lost their lives doing what they loved. Each death changed the sport forever. Story 1. The marathon that killed. The Olympic Games were underway, and 68 runners prepared for the marathon. Among them was Francisco Lázaro, a 21-year-old athlete from Portugal. He was determined to represent his country well. But the weather conditions that day were brutal. The temperature reached 89 degrees Fahrenheit, with high humidity and no cloud cover. This was extremely hot for Sweden, and dangerous for marathon runners. Before the race, Lázaro made a fatal mistake. Based on the incorrect medical beliefs of that time, he covered large portions of his body with suet. This was animal fat, normally used for cooking. Athletes back then believed it would prevent sunburn and stop their bodies from losing water through sweat. They were completely wrong. At 1:45 in the afternoon, the race began. Lázaro started at a conservative pace. He moved steadily through the streets of Stockholm. For the first 10 kilometers, he looked strong and composed. Spectators cheered as he passed. But as the race continued, problems began. The temperature kept climbing. By the 25-kilometer mark, many runners were showing clear signs of heat distress. Lázaro's pace started to slow. Witnesses noticed him staggering. His running form became irregular. The suet coating on his skin was preventing his body from cooling itself. Instead of protecting him, it was trapping heat inside his body. He was essentially being cooked alive. At the 30-kilometer mark, near the town of Sollentuna, disaster struck. Lázaro suddenly veered to the side of the road. His legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed onto the ground, completely unconscious. Race officials and doctors rushed to help him. When they touched his skin, it was alarmingly hot. But it was also completely dry. There was no sweat. His pulse was rapid, but very weak. Doctors immediately recognized the symptoms. Lázaro was suffering from severe hyperthermia. His core body temperature had risen to deadly levels. They poured water over him and quickly transported him to a medical facility. But the damage was already done. Over the next several hours, doctors fought desperately to lower his temperature and restore fluid balance in his body. Nothing worked. His organs began shutting down one by one. The accumulated heat damage was spreading throughout his entire system. His heart, already strained from running the marathon, could not handle the additional stress. At 7:30 the next morning, Francisco Lázaro died. He never regained consciousness. He became the first athlete to die during competition in the modern Olympic Games. The autopsy revealed extreme dehydration and electrolyte imbalances that led to multiple organ failure. His death was entirely preventable. It was caused by a tragic misunderstanding of how the human body works. Story 2. The beating that changed baseball. 1920. 8 years later, on August 16, 1920, thousands of fans packed into New York's Polo Grounds. The Cleveland Indians were facing the New York Yankees. It was a typical afternoon game. Ray Chapman was Cleveland's star shortstop. At 29 years old, he was known for his quick reflexes and exceptional fielding ability. He was one of the best defensive players in baseball. The game moved along normally until the 5th inning. Chapman stepped up to the plate to bat. On the mound for the Yankees was Carl Mays, a pitcher known for his unusual style. Mays threw with a submarine delivery, releasing the ball from an extremely low angle near the ground. This made his pitches very difficult to see and hit. There was another problem that day. The baseball being used was dirty and scuffed from previous plays. Combined with the late afternoon shadows in the stadium, the ball was nearly impossible to see clearly. Chapman leaned in slightly, preparing for the pitch. Mays released the ball. What happened next changed baseball forever. The baseball struck Chapman directly in the head. The impact was so loud that it echoed through the entire stadium. Many spectators thought the sound was the ball hitting Chapman's bat. Even the umpire was confused. Carl Mays himself thought Chapman had bunted the ball. He fielded what he believed was a ground ball and threw it to first base. Everything seemed normal for just a moment, but Chapman was in serious trouble. After being hit, he instinctively took several steps toward first base. Then he suddenly stopped. He dropped to his knees. A look of confusion crossed his face. Blood began seeping from his left ear. Players from both teams rushed to his side as he collapsed onto the dirt. Team doctors reached him within seconds. The crowd fell completely silent. Chapman was helped to his feet, but he was wobbling badly and clearly disoriented. He tried to walk off the field with assistance, but he couldn't maintain his balance. Something was very wrong. He was rushed to St. Lawrence Hospital in New York. There, doctors made a horrifying discovery. Chapman's skull was fractured. The impact had been so severe that bone fragments had been driven nearly an inch deep into his brain. Surgeons immediately performed an emergency operation. They removed a piece of his skull to relieve the pressure building inside his head. They did everything they could, but Chapman never regained consciousness. At 4:40 the next morning, he was pronounced dead. Ray Chapman remains the only player in Major League Baseball history to die from an injury sustained during a game. His death led to immediate and permanent changes in baseball. The league quickly banned the spitball and other pitches that deliberately dirtied the baseball. More importantly, umpires began regularly replacing dirty balls with clean ones during games. This made the balls much easier for batters to see. This practice continues to this day. Every time an umpire tosses a scuffed ball out of play and brings in a fresh one, it's partly because of what happened to Ray Chapman. Story 3, The Cyclist and the Car. 1971. We move forward to March 15, 1971. A modest crowd gathered in the small Belgian town of Retail to watch a local cycling race. One rider stood out immediately. Jean-Pierre Monsère wore the rainbow jersey, the most prestigious symbol in cycling. This special jersey is awarded only to the current world champion. Monsère was just 22 years old and already considered one of cycling's brightest stars. This race was a minor event, nothing like the major classics or grand tours where Monsère normally competed. For him, it was simply a chance to build fitness early in the season while racing close to home. The 10-kilometer circuit wound through narrow country roads. Spectators lined the route, enjoying the first hints of spring weather. Monsère quickly established himself at the front of the race. His powerful pedaling and professional positioning made him easy to spot, even without the distinctive rainbow jersey. As he approached the 4th kilometer of the course, he was riding confidently near the front of a small breakaway group. The road ahead appeared clear. Race marshals had blocked most of the intersections along the route, but critically, not all local residents had been properly notified about the road closures. Without warning, a small British-made car appeared on the course. It was driven by an elderly man who had no idea a bicycle race was taking place. The vehicle moved directly into the path of the oncoming cyclists. The riders had only seconds to react. Other cyclists swerved frantically to avoid the collision, but Monsère was positioned on the outside of the group. He had nowhere to go. There was no escape. His bicycle struck the car's front bumper at approximately 30 miles per hour. The impact launched him over the handlebars. His body hit the windshield first, then was thrown violently onto the asphalt road. His helmet provided almost no protection. Cycling helmets in 1971 were made of basic leather, nothing like the hard-shell helmets used today. Spectators screamed as they watched the world champion lying motionless on the pavement. Blood pooled beneath his head. The rainbow jersey was already stained red. A doctor who was watching the race from the crowd immediately ran to help. He began resuscitation efforts as race officials frantically radioed for an ambulance. Other medical assistants arrived within minutes. But despite their desperate attempts, Monsère's injuries were too severe. The impact had caused massive trauma to his skull and cervical spine. There was nothing anyone could do. At 4:15 in the afternoon, less than 30 minutes after the collision, Jean-Pierre Monsère was pronounced dead at the scene. The cycling world lost its youngest world champion. An intersection that should have been closed became the site of an entirely preventable tragedy. Story 4. The Dive Gone Wrong. 1983. 12 years later, on July 29, 1983, the Commonwealth Pool in Edmonton, Canada was filled with spectators. They were attending the World University Games, a major international sporting event. Sergei Chalibashvili was competing in the diving competition. The 21-year-old Soviet athlete was considered one of the most promising talents in the sport. His specialty was the 10-meter platform, where he regularly performed dives of the highest difficulty with seemingly effortless precision. For his fourth dive of the competition, Chalibashvili prepared to attempt something extremely challenging. He would perform a reverse 3.5 somersault in the tuck position. This was one of the most difficult dives in all of competitive diving. He stood at the edge of the platform, 10 meters above the water. That's roughly the height of a 3-story building. He concentrated intensely, visualizing every rotation he needed to complete. The crowd fell silent as he began his approach. His steps were measured and confident. His takeoff from the platform appeared completely normal. He gained the appropriate height and initiated his rotation. Everything looked perfect, but something went wrong in midair. Chalibashvili's body opened up slightly too early from the tight tuck position. This was a critical error. It threw off his rotation speed by just a fraction. As he descended toward the water, it became clear to everyone watching that he wouldn't complete all the required rotations. Instead of entering the water vertically, as planned, Chalibashvili struck the back of his head directly on the concrete edge of the platform. The sound of the impact echoed through the suddenly silent arena. His body fell limply into the pool. Blood immediately began clouding the water around him. Fellow divers jumped into the pool to assist him. Medical personnel rushed to the scene. They pulled Chalibashvili from the water. He was unconscious. A deep gash on his head exposed his skull where it had struck the concrete. Paramedics carefully stabilized his neck and applied pressure to the wound. His vital signs were weak, but he was still alive as they loaded him into an ambulance. At the University of Alberta Hospital, doctors discovered the full extent of his injuries. The impact had caused severe trauma to his brainstem and cerebellum. These are critical parts of the brain that control basic life functions. Chalibashvili was placed on life support in the intensive care unit. For 9 days, he remained in a deep coma. He showed no signs of neurological activity. His brain had been too severely damaged at the moment of impact. Despite every medical intervention available, the damage was irreversible. On August 7, 1983, 9 days after the accident, Sergei Chalibashvili's heart stopped beating. He died without ever regaining consciousness. His promising career and young life ended because of a split-second miscalculation in the air. Story 5, the Snowcat Collision, 1992. 9 years later, we arrive at the 1992 Winter Olympics in Albertville, France. On February 22nd, the crisp mountain air at Les Arcs was filled with anticipation. Athletes were preparing for the speed skiing competition. This was a demonstration sport at these Olympics, where skiers regularly exceeded 125 miles per hour down specially prepared slopes. Nicolas Bouchetey was a 27-year-old Swiss competitor. He was among the favorites to win a medal in this dangerous sport. The morning conditions were perfect for training. There was clear visibility, firm snow, and minimal wind. Bouchetey and several teammates decided to take a warm-up run before the day's official practice session. They set out on a marked trail that ran adjacent to the main competition course. They built speed gradually as they descended the mountain. Bouchetey accelerated into a gentle depression in the slope. His body was in the aerodynamic tuck position that speed skiers use to minimize wind resistance. His specialized suit and helmet were designed to help him achieve maximum velocity. At approximately 68 miles per hour, he approached a small rise in the terrain. This was still relatively slow by speed skiing standards, but extremely fast by any normal measure. As he crested the hill, Bouchetey had no time to react to what he saw. A snowcat was parked directly in his path. This was a large machine used for grooming ski slopes. It had been maintaining a service road that intersected with the training run. Critically, no warning signs or barriers had been placed to alert skiers that the machine would be there. The operator had no radio contact with event coordinators. He was completely unaware that athletes would be using the training run that morning. The impact was devastating. Bouchetey's body struck the metal vehicle with tremendous force. His momentum carried him into the machine's steel frame and treads. The sound of the collision alerted nearby skiers and course workers. They rushed to the scene immediately. Medical personnel arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. The trauma to Bouchet's head, chest, and internal organs was immediate and fatal. The impact had caused massive internal hemorrhaging and multiple compound fractures throughout his body. He died instantly upon collision. As news of the accident spread, spectators and fellow competitors gathered at the scene. Many were in tears. Olympic officials quickly announced the postponement of all speed skiing events. Flags at all the Olympic venues were lowered to half-mast. An investigation later revealed critical failures in communication between course officials and maintenance crews. The snowcat operator had no radio contact with event coordinators. He had no way of knowing athletes would be on that training run. Simple communication could have prevented this tragedy. Nicolas Bouchet's death led to major safety improvements in extreme skiing sports, but it came at the highest possible cost. Story 6. The penalty save that killed. 2017. We move forward 25 years to November 29, 2017. Spectators filled a small gymnasium in Barra, Brazil to watch a regional futsal match. Futsal is a type of indoor soccer played with 5 players on each side. Santos Sousa was the 38-year-old goalkeeper for Flamengo de Piri, a team competing in the local amateur league. He was a veteran player respected in the community. The indoor arena was humid and crowded. The match had entered its final minutes when the referee's whistle cut through the noise. A penalty had been awarded to the opposing team. This is one of the most crucial moments in any soccer match. The goalkeeper stands alone, while one player from the other team gets a free shot on goal from close range. Santos Sousa positioned himself between the goalposts. He bounced slightly on his toes, staying loose and ready. His teammates stood silently at midfield. They could do nothing to help. The opposing striker approached the ball with measured, confident steps. This was a practiced routine. The shot came hard and fast. It was aimed directly at the center of the goal. Santos Sousa didn't dive to either side. Instead, he stepped forward boldly, making himself as large as possible. The ball struck him squarely in the chest. The impact was solid but seemed unremarkable. The ball deflected harmlessly away. Perfect save. The crowd erupted in cheers. Santos Sousa raised his arms in celebration. His teammates rushed toward him, shouting congratulations on the crucial save. Everything seemed completely normal. For a few seconds, everyone was celebrating. Then, without any warning, Santos Sousa's expression changed. A look of confusion crossed his face. He reached out toward a teammate, who caught him as his legs gave way beneath him. His body went completely limp. He collapsed onto the court floor. The celebration instantly turned to panic. Players from both teams signaled frantically for medical help. A team doctor reached him within seconds and immediately began CPR. The gymnasium fell silent. The cheerful noise was replaced by horrified quiet. Children in the crowd were quickly ushered outside as the medical team continued resuscitation efforts. For nearly 20 minutes, they fought desperately to restart his heart. When paramedics arrived, they took over and applied a defibrillator. The electric shocks caused Santos Sousa's body to jolt violently, but his heart showed no response. There was no rhythm, no sign of recovery. Despite their desperate efforts, Santos Sousa never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Right there on the futsal court, medical examiners later determined he had suffered sudden cardiac arrest. The specific cause was something called commotio cordis. This is an extremely rare but fatal disruption of the heart's rhythm. It occurs when a person receives a precise impact to the chest wall at exactly the critical moment in their cardiac cycle. The penalty save, executed perfectly, had delivered that impact at exactly the wrong millisecond. His heart's electrical system was disrupted completely, and it simply stopped beating. Commotio cordis is so rare that many doctors will never see a case in their entire careers. But when it happens, it is almost always fatal. Story 7. Lightning on the Field. 2018. Our final story takes place just 1 year later, on October 10, 2018. Dark clouds gathered over Banyumas, Indonesia, as 2 local teams competed on a municipal football field. The weather had been threatening all afternoon, with humid air and distant thunder rumbling in the background. Raharja was a 35-year-old midfielder for PSI Banyumas. He moved across the pitch with the confident stride of a veteran player. Despite the threatening weather, officials allowed the match to continue. In the 70th minute of play, light rain began to fall. Players glanced upward at the darkening sky, but the precipitation seemed manageable. Spectators opened umbrellas as they continued watching from the sidelines. No one recognized the danger. The storm was intensifying rapidly. At precisely 4:17 in the afternoon, a brilliant flash illuminated the entire pitch. The lightning bolt struck without any warning. Video footage later showed the strike hitting just above the center of the field. The electrical current dispersed instantly across the wet ground, spreading out like invisible fingers of death. Raharja, who was positioned near midfield, took the full impact of the strike. His body convulsed instantly. He fell backward onto the pitch. For a moment, other players didn't realize what had happened. They assumed he had simply slipped on the increasingly wet surface. Then someone shouted for help. Players from both teams rushed to his motionless form. Raharja lay perfectly still. His jersey was actually smoking slightly from the intense heat of the lightning strike. Medical staff reached him within seconds. His pulse was weak and erratic. Burn marks were clearly visible on his chest and left shoulder. This is where the electrical current had entered his body. The rain intensified dramatically as paramedics performed CPR on the muddy field. They worked frantically, their clothes soaking through. An ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Raharja was rushed to Banyumas Regional Hospital as teammates and spectators watched in stunned silence. Inside the emergency room, doctors found severe internal damage. The electrical current from the lightning had caused catastrophic disruption to his cardiac rhythm. The electrical pathways in his heart had been essentially destroyed. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, including repeated defibrillation and emergency medications, Raharja's heart could not be stabilized. The electrical burn pathway had created irreversible damage to his cardiac tissue. At 5:42 in the evening, just 85 minutes after being struck, Raharja was pronounced dead. Meteorologists later confirmed that the lightning bolt had delivered approximately 300 million volts of electricity through his body. This is far more than any human being could possibly survive. Conclusion. These 7 tragic stories span more than a century of sports history. Each athlete died doing what they loved. Each death was sudden and unexpected, but their deaths were not meaningless. Each tragedy led to important changes. Francisco Lázaro's death taught us about the dangers of heat and the importance of proper hydration. Ray Chapman's death gave us cleaner, more visible baseballs and banned dangerous pitches. Jean-Pierre Monsére's death led to better safety protocols at cycling races. Sergei Chalibashvili's tragedy improved diving safety standards. Nicolas Bochate's death resulted in better communication systems at skiing events. Santos Sousa's death raised awareness of commotio cordis. Raharja's death reinforced the critical importance of weather safety protocols in outdoor sports. Today's athletes benefit from the lessons learned from these tragedies. Better equipment, improved safety rules, and increased awareness help protect athletes around the world. These 7 athletes will never be forgotten. Their legacies live on in the safety measures that protect athletes today.